Judith Heumann was the first wheelchair rider to become a teacher in the New York City school system. She eventually became the highest-ranking disabled person in the U.S. federal government, working for both Presidents Bill Clinton and Barack Obama. Heumann joined other activists with disabilities on the front lines, demanding inclusion and accessibility at a time when the country regarded Americans with disabilities as not second, but third-class citizens.
Regardless of the type of disability we had, and regardless of the type of discrimination that we were experiencing, we needed to fight for equality and justice together.
Her work as an unflinching activist paved the way for the landmark 1990 Americans with Disabilities Act. This is Judy, and this is her story. Judy Heumann grew up in Brooklyn, New York, the daughter of German Jewish immigrants who escaped the Holocaust. At the height of the polio epidemic of 1949, she contracted the virus at just 18 months old. She survived, but polio paralyzed her.
I have limited use of my hands and arms, and I don't walk. To this day, people stare frequently.
At the time, it wasn't uncommon for parents to institutionalize children with disabilities, and a doctor recommended that fate for Heumann. Her parents refused to send their daughter away.
They had just decided that they were going to support me being able to move forward with my life.
Her mother tried getting her admitted to kindergarten, but many schools denied it, claiming Heumann was a fire hazard. Instead, she received 2.5 hours of homeschooling a week until she was in 4th grade. While her neighborhood friends embraced her, one day, on the way to a candy store,
A young boy asked me if I was sick.
the jarring incident, which she details in her book, she says, left her feeling like a butterfly becoming a caterpillar.
I started seeing myself in some way as not being the same.
Eventually, Heumann was accepted into a New York City public school program for students with disabilities. But her experience was far from normal. She recalls her classes being hidden away in the basement, disconnected from the rest of the school. But Heumann persisted, becoming the first student from her grade school program to go on to high school, and eventually college. When she got to her dorm room at Long Island University, she said she had to ask for help every single time entering the bathroom or exiting the building.
Steps, I think, in many ways, really try to keep you in your place.
Yet Heumann's dreams never dwindled. She wanted to become a teacher. But since there'd never been a teacher hired in New York City who used a wheelchair, she knew there would be more barriers to overcome. During a physical assessment for her teaching license, she was asked to walk in front of doctors and was asked questions like, "How do you use the bathroom?" Later, she was denied her license by the New York City Board of Education. She told her story to a friend who was a stringer for the New York Times. A day later, a reporter reached out, and soon 2 articles were published chronicling her experience trying to get her teacher's license.
And that I felt was really a phenomenal opportunity.
More newspapers published articles on Heumann's plight. One powerful headline reading, "You can be president, not teacher with polio." Then, at age 22, Heumann took her case to federal court. After the Board of Ed settled with her out of court, Heumann got her license to teach. That's when Judy Heumann became the first teacher using a wheelchair hired in New York City. 3 years into her teaching career, Heumann began working for the Center of Independent Living and was later offered a position to work for U.S. Senator Harrison Williams in New Jersey. In 1975, on a flight to D.C., she endured a stunning indignity, being forcibly taken off a plane and arrested for flying without a companion. There were proposed airline regulations aiming to restrict people with certain disabilities from flying independently, but those restrictions had not been enacted. Still, Heumann was arrested and told her actions were illegal.
You know, Rosa Parks gets arrested for not being willing to move to the back of the bus, and I wasn't about to acquiesce to what I considered to be a really inappropriate violation of my rights.
The police who arrested her asked for her ID. She showed them her U.S. Senate badge, and Heumann says their tone immediately shifted. She was released, but missed her flight. Finally, a spark of hope after the decades of discrimination, the Rehabilitation Act of 1972. It was the first time the government acknowledged that Americans with disabilities were being discriminated against at an alarming rate nationwide and had been for years. To draw attention to the legislation, Heumann organized the longest federal sit-in in U.S. history in April of 1977, demanding the act be signed into law after being delayed for 4 years.
There are people that want to stay here until, and there is a significant number of those people.
By far the largest and longest protest ever organized by disabled people in this area.
We will no longer allow the government to oppress disabled individuals. We want the law enforced. We want no more segregation. We will accept no more discussion of segregation. And I would appreciate it if you would stop shaking your head in agreement when I don't think you understand what we are talking about.
It brought deaf people and blind people and physically disabled people, people with all kinds of disabilities together.
Shortly after, the legislation was finally signed into action. Years later, in 1990, disabled activists took to the U.S. Capitol building, urging Congress to pass the momentous and sweeping Americans with Disabilities Act. The ADA would protect the rights of people with disabilities and require adaptations to be made across the country to include them in public life, from jobs to schools to public transportation. In the powerful demonstration, people left their wheelchairs and crutches behind to climb up the Capitol steps.
Just take your time, Jennifer. You want to take a break? I'll take all night if I have to. All right.
4 months later, on July 26, 1990, the ADA passed.
Let the shameful wall of exclusion finally come tumbling down.
The Americans with Disabilities Act, we're talking about a change in the physical environment. Accessible buses, accessible trains, ramps, movie theaters, technology for people who are deaf or blind.
In 1992, the Clinton administration offered Judy Heumann a job at the Office of Special Education and Rehabilitation Services. She became the highest-ranking disabled person at the time in the U.S. government.
Thank you, Judy, for your work and the power of your example. And thanks to your mom.
In 2010, the Obama administration appointed her Special Advisor for International Disability Rights Efforts.
In the 1970s, Judy Heumann helped lead the longest sit-in at a federal building in U.S. history in support of disability rights. Today, she's at the State Department advocating for people with disabilities worldwide. She and all the others I mentioned deserve America's thanks for their tireless efforts.
I feel what was going on between the Clinton administration and the Obama administration is that the impact of voices of disabled people are slowly being heard more. I believe what I've meant for others is an example of how people can live their lives being open and honest and fighting for justice. We need to never give up on that.